Hi guys, this week we're concentrating on choosing healthy grains. Now, this is really important because there are lots of diets out there, such as the paleo diet, that claim that eating grains is actually bad for your health. However, the reality is that grains have been a part of the human diet for tens and thousands of years. And so when it comes to eating grains, it's important to understand which grains are healthy and which ones are not so healthy. And grains are simply the seeds of grass-like plants called cereals. Some of the most commonly used varieties include wheat, rice, and corn, which account for well over half of all the calories consumed by human beings worldwide. Some seeds of non-grass plants or pseudocereals are also considered grains, including amaranth, buckwheat, and quinoa. And so when we're talking about healthy grains versus non-healthy grains, what we are really talking about is whole grains. Now, whole grain kernels have three parts. The first of these is called the germ. Now I've done this little diagram here so you can see it, that little red part. And this is the inner layer where all of the vitamins, minerals, protein, and plant compounds are found. Next we have the endosperm. And this is the middle layer and it's mostly made up of carbohydrates. And then we have the bran, and this is the hard outer layer or shell and contains minerals, antioxidants, and lots of fiber. Now grains can be crushed, cracked, or rolled. Nonetheless, as long as these three parts are present in their original proportions, they are considered whole grains. And there are many different kinds, including oats, brown rice, whole wheat, whole corn, quinoa, and many more. Products made from these foods, such as certain different types of breakfast cereals, breads, and pastas, are all considered whole grain as long as they're made entirely from whole grains and not a mixture of whole and refined grains. Which takes me on to the next point, and that is unhealthy grains. And so unhealthy grains are grains which have been refined, meaning that they have had the germ and bran removed, leaving only the endosperm, okay? Now, this is done to give the grains a finer texture and improve their shelf life, but it also removes dietary fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Some manufacturers try to add some of these components back in, and this is called enriched refined grains, where they try to put it back in. However, they're still not as healthy or nutritious as the whole versions. And these include things such as white bread or bread rolls, most pita breads, white rice, refined oatmeal, bran, wheat germ, cornflakes, and most of our ready-to-eat cereals. And so eating healthy whole grain products plays an important part in our diet. They provide important nutrients, including vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, and other healthy plant compounds. And due to their fiber content, whole grains help support healthy digestion by giving bulk to stools and feeding your beneficial gut bacteria, which is critical to proper immune function. It's no wonder then why regularly consuming whole grains lowers your risk of dying prematurely from any cause. This has much to do with the fact that whole grains reduce inflammation, which is at the root of virtually all chronic diseases. They lower your risk of heart disease, which is the leading cause of death worldwide. They also help to lower your risk of developing high cholesterol, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and cancers of the colon, which is one of the most types of cancer. They also help to significantly lower your risk of becoming overweight or obese too, which is an area that many of us need help with today. And this is particularly true when you replace the refined grains in your diet such as eating fiber-rich foods, because they can help fill you up and prevent you from overeating. And so, as you can see, there are many reasons to ensure that you are making healthier choices when it comes to consuming grains. So now that you know why choosing healthy grains is really important, I just want to provide some ways in which you can choose healthier grains more often. And the first tip is to choose intact whole grains where possible, meaning that they have the least amount of human interference as possible. They are unrefined and as such are less likely to contain added sugar, saturated fat and sodium. They are also much more nutritious too. And examples of intact whole grains include things like whole oats, brown rice, barley, bulgur, which is cracked wheat, quinoa, millet and buckwheat. Now, most of us get our whole grains from bread and breakfast cereals. And so when choosing these foods, ensure to choose intact whole grains wherever possible. Next, it's really important to understand food labels, which can be really tricky because some whole grain products like crackers and breakfast cereals can have lots of sugar, salt and saturated fat, which can quickly outweigh the benefits of eating that product just to obtain the whole grains. And so when it comes to choosing healthy grains, always ensure to read the ingredients list and choose products that name a whole grain ingredient first or near the beginning of the list. Try to look for the words whole wheat, whole grain, and then the name of the grain, stone ground whole, and then the name of the grain, wholemeal, as well as oats, oatmeal, quinoa, rye, bran, kibbled wheat, barley, and buckwheat. Remember that foods labelled as multigrain or stone ground, 100% wheat, cracked wheat, or organic flour may not contain any whole grains at all. If it simply says wheat instead of whole wheat, it's not whole either. Also, look for products that contain the most amount of fibre per 100 grams, which is on all nutritional labels. Also look for products where you can actually see visible chunks of the grain rather than the grain being ground or crushed. Okay, so another thing you want to do is to look at ways to make simple, affordable swaps from refined grains to intact whole grains and whole grain products. And some examples of this could include swapping from white flour to whole grain flours, such as wholemeal flour, from white pasta to wholemeal pasta, from white bread to whole grain bread, including bread rolls as well, from white rice to brown rice, barley or quinoa, water crackers to whole grain crackers, and things like rice bubbles to oats. Also consider swapping refined grains like white bread and pasta with vegetables too. For example, you could use lettuce cups instead of white bread wraps next time you're making something like burritos. Another thing you can do to boost your consumption of healthy grains is to base one whole meal around a whole grain. And some ideas to help you get started could include some examples such as for breakfast, you could have porridge or bircher muesli or yogurt or cereal sprinkled with buckwheat groats or toasted whole grain bread. Or maybe for lunch, you could have a wholemeal salad wrap or soup with a whole grain bread roll. Or for your snacks, you could have whole grain crackers with hummus or air popped popcorn. I love popcorn. Or for dinner, you could have a stir fry with buckwheat noodles, add barley to soups or casseroles or risotto. We can make salads with different grains like brown rice and wholemeal pasta or quinoa. Again, quinoa keeps popping up, one of my favorites. The final thing I'd like to suggest is to meal prep. Let's face it, we're all busy these days, and anything we can do to help us save time will help us maintain balance. And considering that we spend several times per day, every day of our lives eating, then this is where meal prepping can help us save a ton of time. Therefore, if you're cooking whole grains like brown rice or bulgur, wheat, quinoa and barley, then just cook a heap extra and then freeze the rest into individual portions. I do it all the time. You can then serve them later on as a side dish or as a base for your next meal. Remember, the most intact whole grains like quinoa, brown rice, barley, millet, etc. are cooked by placing it in water and just simply bringing it to the boil and simmering it until the liquid is absorbed. Obviously, cooking times for individual grains all vary, so be sure to follow the instructions on the back of the packets. Cooking whole grains that you may not be used to may seem a little bit difficult in the beginning, but as soon as you know how, it really is a breeze. And the last point I want to touch on is to realize that whilst whole grains are healthy for most people, they might not be appropriate for all people at all times. This includes for people who have celiac disease and gluten sensitivity. Wheat, barley and rye contain gluten, a type of protein that some people are intolerant or allergic to. Having a gluten allergy, celiac disease or gluten sensitivity can cause a range of symptoms including fatigue, indigestion and even joint pain. With that said, gluten-free whole grains including buckwheat, rice, oats and amaranth are fine for most people with these conditions. However, some have difficulty tolerating any type of grain and experience digestive distress and other symptoms. Also, some grains such as wheat are high in short chain carbohydrates, which are called FODMAPs, and these can cause symptoms in some people with irritable bowel syndrome, which is very common. It's also about knowing your body and what is best for you. So always speak to your doctor, nutritionist or naturopath regarding your own individual requirements. Also, maybe consider getting an intolerance test done, which will tell you exactly what you can and can't consume if you're unsure. So how many servings of healthy grains do you eat per day? Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to learn more about the other essential attributes of staying in your best shape. And until next time, watch what you chew, do what you need to do, and always live true.